At 55, your pension unlocks, and this changes everything because it gives you access to a large amount of money that previously you've only stared at and saved into. And it can be very tempting to want to access that money. Now, pension access is changing. In April 2028, the age of access is increasing to 57. That's still a whole decade sooner than the UK state pension. A lot of people get this confused. So that workplace pension, you can access 10 years before your state pension, which is fantastic. And it can help you bridge the gap between early retirement and state pension access. Now, the key thing is the reasons for accessing it need to be right. And it might be the right thing to pay off your mortgage, to pay off some loans, to buy a car, hopefully not a Ferrari. That was a news article from, like 15 years ago now, when everyone thought pensioners would be buying Lamborghinis with their pensions that they'd spent decades saving. The key thing is that if you've got a good interest rate on your mortgage or on a loan, it's maybe 1, 2, 3, 5%, but you're investing appropriately and it's growing at like 8% or more if you're very adventurous, then it could be a big mistake to take the money out of something that is very tax efficient because there's no capital gains tax on the appreciation of the pension in its value. But it can be tempting. I've seen a lot of people take money out of their pension to pay off their mortgage. And one guy I've met recently, he paid off his mortgage with his pension. He took like £100,000 out. And I'm going, I love the sentiment around that. And that might feel right, but your pension was growing at around 9% for the last 20 years because it's in a high investment, a global equity fund. But your mortgage interest rate was only 1.98%, which is a fantastic rate. So I'm just going, he's missed out on potentially so much money in extra growth. But for him, that was a personal choice. And so there is a balance between paying off things, flexibility, as well as what you actually want to happen. And you need to be able to make that decision for yourself. There's a couple things you do need to know about accessing your pension. There's something called the MPAA, Money Purchase Annual Allowance, which means you can take your tax-free cash, no problem. The remaining amount goes into something called a drawdown account, also known as the crystallized part of your pension. So that's the remaining 75%. What this means is if you access even a penny of that income, then you trigger it. And that means you can only contribute up to £10,000 a year going forwards in retirement, which means you're really capped at how much you can pay or save towards your retirement. Now, accessing your pension at 55, especially if you're in a very high demanding role or it's something that you maybe you want to retire early, but you can't quite afford it just yet, then helping you bridge that gap to state pension is really important for you to enjoy your life because it's quite literally your life and your life savings. So it's very common for people to take just the tax-free cash annually to start to phase down their retirement. So if you had, say, £200,000 in your pension and it's invested appropriately, and you were accessing 25% of, say, £100,000, that would of course be 25,000, but you don't need to take 25,000 out in one lump sum. You could maybe crystallize, which is that pension access, it's a fancy word, maybe 50,000, which means you then get £12,500. And for a lot of people, that can support them massively to reducing their hours at work. And you might be able to stagger that across a number of years to help you retire a bit more smoothly. Those first few years, which we call the go-go years, where you're traveling, you're doing all the hobbies, everything you've ever wanted to do while you've been chained to your desk or whatever type of environment you've got at work, it means that you spend more in early retirement. But actually, as you get a bit older, you don't spend as much. You've done the things you wanted to do, and yes, you're probably still doing those things, but you found ways of doing it in a more cost-effective approach. The other thing that's really important, and so not to glaze over that, but it means that early retirement is possible, and it could be appropriate if you understand how much you're spending and how much you will spend in retirement, especially if you haven't got a mortgage. That's such a lifesaver. And I know there's lots of news articles at the moment saying never buy a property, you should rent for the rest of your life. Renting isn't cool when you get old, guys, and I do not recommend it. The important thing here is that whatever you decide to do, a lot of people decrease their risk in their pension. What I mean by that is they decrease the exposure to equities, meaning their money sometimes isn't even growing by inflation, which is incredibly problematic because your pot starts to go down. The actual value of it is going down. It's eroded. So ensuring your money is invested appropriately, even at 55, If you're living to 85, which is the average lifespan, you've got decades of potential growth that you're potentially missing out on. So make sure you do look at the fees and charges on your pension, you do look at the performance, and you make the right decision as to what you want to do. And hopefully this has given you enough information to consider those options. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you've got any questions, I will always respond to them. So please put them in the comments and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.